Red Line Logbook here to explain the Hephaistios Familia. The Familia starts off with Hephaestus herself, a goddess from the Olympian part of the heavens. Hephaestus is a goddess of forging, but she isn't just a goddess of forging, she's the goddess of forging. In heaven, she was seen as the greatest forger of all the gods. So Hephaestus was actually one of the most respected goddesses throughout all the heavens, but she wasn't one of the most liked. And the reason for that was the fact that she's technically ugly. Think about the gods, is they're all primordial beings, so they're just born as they are, and that's how they've always been. And every single one of them is good looking. Even if they're on the older side of what a mortal is supposed to look like, they're still considered good looking, or at least regal in some manner. For example, Uranus looks like what you would expect God would look like. An old man with a long beard and white hair. So he has a very opposing figure that people respect. And so a goddess is supposed to be attractive, but because there's an aspect of Hephaestus that is hideous, her eye, this made the other gods completely reject her and repulse when they even looked at her. In fact, the only one who ever looked at her and didn't even once wince at the sight of her was Hestia, which is why the two of them became friends and is the one person that Hephaestus trusts over anyone else, even if she finds Hestia to be a lazy pain in the ass sometimes. At a certain point, being judged for the way she looked eventually got to her, and she just started covering her eye with a patch. At a certain point, when the age of the gods began, she decided to descend down to the mortal world, where she opened up her own familia in Aurorio. She decided to start a merchant-style familia, which means she doesn't have to send her familia members on expeditions of any kind. All she has to do is just pay extra in taxes. And the merch that they sell, of course, is crafting items like weapons, shields, armor, etc., because they're a blacksmithing familia. They quickly grew to the point where their familia is now the 5th largest in number. They used to be the 6th, but the Soma Familia was recently downsized. We'll get to that later when we talk about the Soma Familia. They're also seen as one of the 5 most important familias in Aurora right now. The reason for this is because they are the number 1 blacksmithing familia, and so most of adventurers buy weapons, armor, and equipment from the Hephaistios Familia. They basically run the entire war machine that is Aurorio. While their main store is connected to their familia home base, Elthan Vacano, they have shops all across Aurorio, including they rent out spaces of floors 4 through 8 of Babel Tower. Now, the shop connected to their home is, of course, where the most valuable goods are placed. Shops across the city are varied in value between high and low tier, and the Babel Tower is, the 4th floor is where their best stuff is put, and then floors 5 through 8 are all reserved for beginner and level 1 smiths to present their equipment. Hephaestus encourages a competitive nature amongst her familia members, and so each one is given their own smith to work from in private, so this way their techniques cannot be stolen. And I mean this is given to every member of her familia, even a newbie who just started out. They immediately get their own smith. They're also encouraged to try to, in some cases, steal customers from one another. Now, there is a limit to what you can do when it comes to this. So you aren't allowed to steal someone else's customer if that person has a contract with them. But if they're non-committed, you're allowed to do whatever you can to get that adventure as your personal customer. So I guess I should explain what a contract is. So a specific smith and a specific adventurer will make a deal with each other where, from now on, whenever an adventurer collects items from the dungeon, instead of taking it to the guild, what they'll do is they'll take it to the smith, and then the smith will forge weapons and armor and whatever else the adventurer needs personally for that adventure. This has 2 major effects. 1, it allows the adventurer to have a discount whenever they have a new item made. And 2, whenever a forger is forging something for a specific individual, that item is actually stronger because the smith has a personal connection to that item because they're giving it to a specific individual. And this also benefits the smith because now they have a steady supply of income coming in. Now they have a contract with an individual. And if you got a talent, you can pick out the right customer that will end up becoming one hell of an adventure, and you'll bring in plenty of money. Also, being part of the Hephaistios Familia helps you sell your wares. Now, once you have the developability of blacksmith, which you get at level 2, you now have Hephaestus' permission to put her name on all of your items that you forge. And once you see an item that has the Hephaestus seal on it, you're basically being told that this is worth tons of money. And these weapons and armor are the best around. And if you're wondering why that is, because the blacksmithing ability allows the forger to add special properties to the item they're creating. Basically increase their strength, increase their cutting ability, get more out of the infusement of dropped items from monsters or rare things from the dungeon. And every adventurer's personal favorite, being able to forge magic sword. Hephaestus also has a connection with the forging city of Slogan. This city, which is to the far east of Aurora, is where all the greatest blacksmiths in the world really end up. Because if you want to be a great blacksmith, you gotta find a master, and this city's got every master you could possibly dream of. And because Hephaestus has a personal connection with this city, whenever one of those masters finds an apprentice that they think is special in some way, they will send a letter to Hephaestus herself, and then she will personally come down and test the blacksmith to see if they're worthy of joining her familia. That's actually where she ended up meeting Welf. Now, I've already talked about Welf in the Hephaistios Familia videos, and for the simple fact that, unlike Makoto, who plans on returning to Takemichi, Welf has no interest of ever returning to Hephaistios Familia. His only interest in Hephaestus is marrying her, which the two of them agreed upon that if he can forge a weapon that surpasses anything that she personally forged. To put into perspective just how hard that's going to be, Hephaestus forged Bel's knife, Hestian knife, without using Arcanum, and that knife has the ability to grow the same way that an adventurer has the ability to grow, which means Welf has to create an item greater than the Hestian knife. The captain of the Hephaistios Familia is Tsubaki, a half-dwarf, which means one of her parents was a dwarf and the other was a human, specifically a human from the Far East. Personality-wise, she is completely obsessed with forging. Her one goal is to do it the same as Welf, which is surpass Hephaestus. With that being said, she isn't in love with Hephaestus. She just wants to be a better blacksmith than her, and she basically spends all of her time in the forge, which is a pain to many of the other members of Aurora, because whenever they're doing business with her, they basically have to meet her in her forge because she forgets to take meetings. In fact, even Hephaestus has trouble getting her to do paperwork sometimes. She is the captain of the familia after all, she has responsibilities, but once again, she just loves forging. She's also extremely obsessed with Welf personally. One, because she sees him as the only real rival she has of challenging Hephaestus, and two, she finds him to be somewhat of an irritation, because for the longest time he refused to accept his roots as a Crozo. And so because he had natural talent forging magic swords and he refused to do that, she saw him as just wasting his natural potential. And she actually went out of her way to help Hephaestus convince Welf to accept the fact that he is a Crozo and he should be forging magic swords. And that would be a proper course of action for his talent. She's currently a level 5 in power, and the reason for that is the simple fact that whenever she would forge a new weapon, she immediately had to test it out. And so she just kept going deeper and deeper into the dungeon, slicing up monsters until eventually she just happened to turn into a level 5. It wasn't even her goal to become, a strong warrior. Her goal was just to make a better weapon and to see how far she could push it. We don't know if she has any skills or what her other development abilities are, except for one, which is blacksmith, which is pretty common for a blacksmith to get at level 2. With this, she's able to create first tier weapons and armor. And when I say first tier, I mean her swords can cut through other swords. That's how strong they are. And when she crafts a magic sword, while she'll say it's not as strong as Welf's, which is true, they're still able to injure a first-tier adventurer. Tsubaki has close connections with people that she's forged contracts with, including Garth, who every single weapon and armor you see him wield, they are all created by her personally. In fact, their contract has gone back for years to the point where Garth is able to recognize one of her pieces when it's being used by another individual. The two of them are also super friendly on drinking terms. What I mean by this is that the two of them go out and just get blitzed. She's also a big fan of the rest of the Loki Familia, especially Finn, who she finds to be very cute. She likes cute things. And this isn't a romantic thing. She just finds Prums to be cute and thinks of them kind of like stuffed animals that a woman would have on her bed. We know of one other individual she had a contract with, and that would be Hashana of the Ganesha Familia. He's currently dead, but she used to be his personal forger as well. Tsubaki is very careful about who she takes on contracts with, because at one point, Aiz, when she was a little girl, wanted her to make her weapons, and Tsubaki rejected outright. She had no interest helping young Aiz commit suicide, is how she saw it. And while right now her and Aiz are friends, and Tsubaki's willing to sharpen her blade for her, she still refuses to forge anything for her. In fact, she feels that she made the right choice by not making a contract with Aiz, because at the time, she knew if she gave Aiz strong enough equipment, she would rush deeper into the dungeon and she would die. And Tsubaki 100% is willing to put another human being's life and the value of their life above just making a prized weapon for an upcoming star. Last little thing about Tsubaki is that she has a second name, like all adventurers above level 1, and that is Cyclops. The reason for this is because at an early point in her career, she ended up losing one of her eyes and now wears an eye patch. And she hates this name. Full on hates it. She just finds it to be an insult. She feels the gods are just mocking her for having one eye, which they most likely are. That's kind of how second names go. It's just rare for Tsubaki to realize that, because most mortals don't really understand that the gods are coming up with these cringe names to screw with each other. Other than Tsubaki, there are no other named Hephaistios members. We just know that they are capable smiths because they make up the backbone of Aurorio. And not just that, but over 50 of them are at least level 2, and over 20 of them are at least level 3 or above. This is important because they are given the term the battlesmiths. These level 2 and above battlesmiths are given special carve-out by the guild. Let me explain. So, once again, the Hephaistios Familia are a merchant familia, so they don't have to go on expedition, which is why when Hestia asked Hephaestus if she could lend some members of her familia to go on their expedition, she had to tell Hestia no, because if she did that, then the guild would reclassify her as a dungeon expedition familia, and they would be forced to go into the dungeon. But if a familia has high enough clout with the guild, like the Loki Familia, then they can ask the guild to ignore this rule and allow the battlesmiths to come along with them on an expedition. This allows the Loki Familia to have smiths in the deep floors, so this way they can maintain their weapons, and this also allows the Hephaistios Familia to collect extra special drop items and get some experience in for their members. And of course, the Hephaistios Familia gets to keep their status as a merchant familia. This carve-out also helps out in times of emergency, so the battlesmiths can help out during said emergency. Good example of this was the Battle of Sword Oratoria, which was the final conflict with Ennio in the Labyrinth Noxus. And one more thing, even though they are technically not part of the Hestia Alliance, which is a group that go on expeditions together, because once again, they did that, they would lose their status, they are still very allied with the Hestia Familia, and so in a situation that is extremely dire and extreme, they will of course side with the Hestia Familia, whoever their enemy might be. For example, the Great Faction War, which was the Hestia and every familia you can put together versus the Freya Familia. Hephaestus obviously was one of the first to volunteer to stick by Hestia and ordered her battlesmiths to forge every magic sword they could and then deploy them on the front lines of that battlefield. Alright, if you enjoyed this video, subscribe, give it a thumbs up so you can enjoy more Danmachi and my things. Thank you and have a great day.